Hiya, welcome back to BRR Knowledge Center. In this today's session, we'll talk about a singleton design pattern. So, when it comes to software development, we have a huge number of design patterns. And before we get into development, we must think of what kind of design pattern is suitable for the development. So, in the same line, so we have several kind of design patterns, especially if you look at the gangs of four design patterns, we have a 23 design patterns. So the singleton design pattern is one of the gangs of four design patterns. So if you look at the gangs of four design patterns, we have three categories: creational, structural, behavioral design patterns. So the singleton design pattern belongs to creational design pattern, where it is mentioned in the creational design pattern of gangs of four design patterns list. So when it comes to singleton design pattern, is a singleton design pattern is a creational design pattern, and the purpose of using this design pattern was to ensure that a class only has one instance and provide a global point of access, so that a single instance will have access to all screens and all pages in the project. So make sure this singleton design pattern always having one instance and provide a global point of access to it throughout the life of an application. So access of one instance is preferred to avoid unexpected results, right? So when you have a single instance and you are going to use that instance in across all pages or throughout the lifetime of your application, once you log into the application, then it will definitely avoid unexpected results. So let me share my notepad for discussing more on this. Just opening my notepad here. So when it comes to a singleton design pattern, as I mentioned, it is a creational design pattern. Okay. So the purpose of this design pattern, as I mentioned, it is when any class only having one instance always and have a global point of access. Okay. So the benefits of having this singleton design pattern is access of one instance is preferred to avoid unexpected results. So if you wanted to talk about an example of the singleton design pattern, where exactly it is required for the development process, suppose if you have a kind of a scenario where you are logging the user actions into somewhere, a physical file or database or a log4net logging mechanism. So, and you have all these logging mechanisms across all pages in your project, right? So instead of instantiating this logger or log class instance, if we can initialize this logger instance in single place and provide a provision to access throughout all the screens of your application, then it will become a singleton design pattern. Suppose, as I mentioned, so when you have a logging mechanism into your application and you are expecting to log every user action into some store, like in a database or in the flat file of a physical flat file in the physical device of a system, it basically using it for debugging of or tracing of user actions when something happens to look at the process, like when you have a kind of issue with some operations what user is doing it, and system is deployed on the live servers, and developers definitely don't have an access to the source code, even the user missions, right? So only you have an access to your web servers which you are deployed on somewhere on the cloud. So then if you wanted to debug the user actions to analyze the problem which got reported by the user, you must have some logs, like web server logs or application event logs or your project logs which you are going to inject or include in your development. So that's what the reason of having logger mechanism here. Logger is a class where it is going to log all the user actions in the configuration path. So like in the warnings or errors or debug statements, etc., etc. So if you wanted to put all these actions, you should be define this logger instance at the global place and use that instance in all the screens of your project. With a singleton pattern, it is very easy for implementing this. And the singleton design pattern is very much suitable for this kind of requirement and the development, right? So with singleton, we will create a global instance of the logger class and then invoke the log methods across or throughout the application and all the screens, right? So I'm saying logger implementation. Go out. Application. Right? So we will be defining or creating global instance of the logger class. Then invoke the logger methods like for tracing or debugging or warnings or errors, debug statements or errors or warnings. All the pages of the project. So that way we have only one instance which got global access permission, and you can use that instance in all the screens. Okay, so when it comes to this singleton design pattern, so we basically have different kind of implementations here. The basic structure or prerequisites to create a singleton class was so singleton class structure is we should have private or protected constructor. This is the first requirement, and no public and parameterized constructor. Please make note: no public parameterized constructors. Okay, and second thing is should have a static property to return an instance of a class. So we should have a property to return an instance of a class, right? So static method can also be used to return an instance. And also we can do that. Static uh, method can also be used to return an instance. And third is at least one non-static public method is required for a singleton operation. So we must need at least one non-static public method for a singleton operation. Okay, so these three are the prerequisites to create a singleton class. One is you should have a private constructor, and the second thing is we should have a property method or a static method to return instance of a class. And third one is we should have at least one non-static public method for singleton operation. Also, can declare all methods and properties as static. right, of public to access for singleton operations. So these the four are the no required steps to create a singleton class structure. And if we can follow these steps, then it will become a singleton class for you. Okay. So in the singleton class, so we have basically a default singleton class. You can just simply create it, which we simply follow the above four steps. And if you wanted to implement a real-time singleton class, like if you wanted to define a singleton class, I'm just saying, having a private, property or a static method which can be written instance of a singleton class and have public method for singleton operations, something like that. So thing is, if you wanted to be implementing a simple singleton class, so there might be a chances of accessing and getting wrong results even you have a singleton class in a multi-thread. That's why we should have a thread safety singleton version. So we have different types of singleton classes. One is non-thread safety, so where you just simply not thread safety singleton class. And second thing is a thread safety singleton class. Thread safety singleton class. And fourth one is kind of attempted thread safety using checking. That means even if you've implemented thread safety and you wanted to be verified properly that is that thread safety single instance is already created or not. So you should have checking before you create thread safety instance of singleton class. So that's what we are going to create another kind of singleton class, that is attempted thread safety using double check locking. So that means with the thread safety, we have a lock checking, but if you wanted to, double check the implementation of that safety singleton class is safe or not, so you have a double checking. Okay, that means after locking and before locking, you will be verifying that. And next version of singleton class is so lazy, kind of singleton class we are uh, creating, like lazy instantiation of singleton class. So this singleton class, if you wanted to implement using lazy instantiation, so in the .NET 4 later versions, it's supporting lazy type. Okay. So to make laziness really simple, all you need to do is pass a delegate to the constructor, which calls the singleton constructor, which is done most easily with the lambda expressions. Okay. So these are the different varieties of singleton class creations. The first one is not thread safety singleton class, which is a default singleton class. So if you are creating a not thread safety singleton class, so there might be a problem when multiple things are happening. It like so two different threads could both have evaluated the test, like instance equal to null, and then get the instance, right? Then in the context of like both requests are coming at the same time, then the both creates instances which violates the singleton pattern. So note that in fact the instance may already have been created before the expression is evaluated, but the memory model does not guarantee that the new value of instance will be seen by other thread unless suitable memory barriers have been passed. So if you wanted to write a simple singleton class, let's say if I wanted to create singleton class, I'll simply say a class, public class, you know, singleton. And here, as I mentioned in the second step, so first step should have a private constructor. So then first I'm declaring private singleton. This is my constructor. And then should have a property to return an instance. So I'm just declaring a property of static. Before that, I'm declaring a variable of type singleton class instance equal to null. Okay. Now I'm going to declare a property here. So a public static singleton instance. This is my property, or you can create a public, kind of a static method to get return the instance. So here I'm just checking this instance equal to null. Then only I'm returning, creating instance for my class. Otherwise, I won't create the instance for my singleton class here. So finally here I'm returning my instance. So, and this is what a simple singleton class creation. If you look at here, I have a private constructor and I have a static member. Okay, to access this variable inside of my public method. So this public method, if you wanted to create as a property method, you can create it simply like, here I just created a method. And if you wanted to create a public property like public static singleton instance, this way you need to create, right? And here you can use a get method. Instead of get method, you have same logic what we have written above. Instance equal to singleton. Okay, and once it is closed, this get and then return instance. Okay, so this is the public property definition, and I just removed the parenthesis because this is a property, and I just used a get method here to get the value of, sorry, this has to be inside instance. Okay, so either this way or and that way, you just have one definition. Either, uh, as I mentioned, like in the second step, we should have a property to return an instance of a class, or a static method can also be used to return an instance. So here, this is the static method. Okay. Uh, and this is a static property where it is returning, you know, uh, the instance of your singleton class. So, and third, we must need at least one non-static public method. So that means if you wanted to write a method here, and you can write a method so that you will use that method using a singleton class. That means if you wanted to define a method, simple method, let's say like I wanted to print something when my singleton instance is invoked in different screens. So I'll just write a method. So now I'm just removing one declaration, that is singleton property method, and I'll just having a static method to return this. Okay, and here it is closing my class. Now I'm writing a method here, public void do single and just say that in. So when you invoke this method, it will simply write this line of statement. Another way, you can write some more logic inside of this, where it is constant. That means it won't reinitialize, so it will uh, keep on updating this logic which you are defining inside of this function, and can be accessed this function in anywhere in your project, and then that would be always giving updated information when you access this method. Okay, so this is a simple singleton class created with these four steps. So one is this private constructor and a private static member, private static method to return instance, and have a public method for doing a singleton operations. And simply, if you wanted to use it, you just use singleton as s1 equal to singleton dot instance. So that way, what it is doing is it will call this instance method like here, and it will check for it is not equal null, and the first time it will create an instance, and that instance will return given this. And again, when you create another kind of uh, variable instance, and you call the same way of this instance. Now it goes here and it will look for this variable, because this variable already having an instance memory, address where the previous statement was created and assigned to this particular instance variable. So instead of getting into this instead of if, it will simply return the previously created instance. That means, so across all the screens and any number of times you're using the singleton class, it'll always return the previous instance and not going to create any fresh instance, right? So this is how it is going to avoid the unexpected results. Let us say like you are having some common settings for your application, or some common data which got implemented to share across all the pages. And if you can keep all these common data using the singleton class, and that singleton instance, you can use it in all the pages. So that way you will have always the same data across all the pages, instead of initializing every time. If you can just get it through a singleton class, you'll always have updated information and the same information across all the screens. In the similar way, in the settings of user or the website, you wanted to keep on having all these settings in all the pages, and if you can just keep in the singleton, and then you can simply use that using singleton class. So I hope you understand the concept of singleton class here, the purpose of singleton class in C Sharp. So when you are starting, when you're developing an application, you must think of like what clause is required for the requirement. So if there are some common changes or common methods or common values you want to keep on no transfer or send it to across all the pages, I'll truly suggest you go with singleton design pattern to create, and then keep all the common values into that, or any values or any value you wanted to update globally and then use it on screens. You keep that logic in singleton class. Okay, so thanks for listening to this video, and please subscribe this channel for more videos. Thank you.